We have a virtual audience here today, and we also have an in-person audience here at 1801 Commerce Road. So can somebody give me a thumbs up that we can hear folks online? All right, great. So this presentation has taken a different tone. If any of you have attended the employee information sessions that were done prior to council's adoption of the resolution to transition to VRS, we are now at the point where we have VRS counselors with us who are presenting today about the plan that you would prospectively be going into if you were to transition to VRS. So the plan that we're speaking about today is the hybrid plan. If you're a general employee with prior VRS service in the hybrid plan, that would apply to you. Or if you have no prior VRS service, this would apply to you. And if you're here just to learn, wonderful. The more information, the better. So I do want to set some ground rules before we get started. For those who are in the virtual audience, we ask you to please put your questions in the chat and keep them till the end. We're going to save questions for a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. And we have a few ground rules that I want to reiterate before we get started. So for the Q&A, please keep in mind that you can ask one question and ask the full question, because we have a lot of questions to get through. And if we don't get to you, we can always take your questions by email and come see us afterwards. What we'll do for the virtual audience and the in-person audience is we'll have 3 questions from the in-person audience and then turn to the virtual, have 3 questions from the virtual. So we will facilitate that, but we will also repeat the questions that the in-person audience is asking so the virtual can hear. Does everyone understand that? Before we get started. Okay. Speakerphone.
Mute your phone.
Oh, yes. And if you could mute your phones, that would be wonderful. Thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Sally Godsey from VRS to get started. And she's accompanied by Stephen Scott from Mission Square today. And voila, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you.
So good afternoon, and thank you for coming to this presentation on the VRS hybrid retirement plan features and benefits. This presentation wait a minute. It's a special one. Yes. Okay, go ahead. So what do I push to this? Just push that. Okay. So the presentation is on the hybrid retirement plan. My name is Sally Godsey. I am a hybrid retirement plan counseling representative with the Virginia Retirement System. The hybrid plan has 2 parts. The Virginia Retirement System is the overall plan administrator for the hybrid plan. We provide information for employees and employers. We have a call center for questions for both employees and employers. And the VRS manages the trust fund for the defined benefit plans that VRS sponsors. Now, the hybrid plan has a second part, which is a defined contribution part. We'll talk about it in a minute. And we have a third-party record keeper, Mission Square Retirement. And Stephen Scott from Mission Square is here with me. Stephen?
Thank you, Sally. My name is Stephen Scott. I'm the VRS Defined Contribution Plan Manager. We are the third-party record keepers. I work for Mission Square Retirement, and we are the third-party record keepers for the VRS defined contribution plans. Some of you may be familiar with Mission Square Retirement or supplemental plans that you may already be participating in. Yes, we are the same company, but we have different roles. Me and my team only represent the VRS defined contribution plans, and the Mission Square Retirement that you may be familiar with is separate from the role that me and my team have with the VRS defined contribution plans. I know that sometimes it's confusing, but we each know the other exists, but we can't talk about the other side of things. We only represent the side that we represent.
Okay, so today we've got a lot of material we're going to go through about the hybrid plan. We're going to learn about the plan, investment options, payout options when you leave, and there's some other benefits we're going to talk about that's part of the hybrid plan. And then we'll talk a little bit about accessing your account, online accounts, and other resources available to you. So let's talk about the hybrid plan in general. First of all, who is eligible for the hybrid plan? VRS has several plans that we administer, but the hybrid plan is our most recent plan, and it basically covers anyone who is new to the VRS after January 1 of 2014. It covers state employees, school employees, political subdivisions, and basically the people who are not included are mainly hazardous duty employees. So if you don't have any VRS service in your record prior to 2014 and you come into the VRS, you would be in the hybrid plans. We want to talk a little bit about how this plan is structured, and we'll spend a little bit of time on this because this is really important to understand how this plan works. There are two parts to the hybrid plan, and so they're both part of the plan, but they work very differently. One part is called the defined benefit component of the plan. The defined benefit component of the plan will provide you with a lifetime monthly pension benefit when you meet the age of service eligibility and retire under the plan. Important thing about this, you have to pay into the plan, but all of the risk is borne by the VRS. The VRS has the big trust fund that provides all of the benefits in the defined benefit component of the plan. And this is sort of the foundation of how the plan works, is this lifetime benefit that you can become eligible for. So remember, that is the defined benefit, the lifetime benefit piece of the plan. The other part of the plan is the defined contribution part of the plan. That works as a tax deferred savings program where you and your employer put money into the plan. The money goes into accounts where the money is invested. And over time, with contributions and investment returns, it builds up into this pool of savings that's available to you at retirement. On that part of the plan, the defined contribution part of the plan, you are responsible for managing how that money is invested. So you are going to bear the investment risk for that part of the plan. And it's important that you understand these two different terms as we talk about defined benefit, or DB, and defined contribution, or DC. We talk about those two components, and they mean these two very different parts of the plan, and they work very differently. The defined contribution part of the plan, where those investments go, is the money goes to Mission Square. They are the third-party record keeper. So they handle all of those transactions and record keeping related to that investment component of the plan. Now, members of the hybrid plan have to make contributions out of your pay. So you will make a mandatory contribution of 5%. And then you also have an option to make voluntary contributions in addition to that 5%. This chart here sort of breaks down where all of the contributions go. On the left-hand side, we've got the defined benefit part of the plan. This is the money that goes to VRS. This is that part of the plan where you become eligible for the lifetime monthly pension benefit. Of your mandatory 5% contribution, 4% of it goes to this part of the plan. It goes into an account that the VRS is the record keeper for, called your member contribution account. It's not an investment account. It's just where your 4% mandatory contribution goes. Your employer has to pay into this part of the plan, but the employer money does not go into an account specifically for you. All of the employer money goes into that big trust fund that the VRS manages to make sure we have money to pay benefits to everyone when they retire. The right-hand side of this chart shows where your money goes in the defined contribution part of the plan. Again, this is the money that's going to go to Mission Square, where you are going to manage those investments. You will make a 1% mandatory contribution, and your employer will make a 1% mandatory contribution. That money goes into an account called the hybrid 401(a) cash match account. If you want to make those voluntary contributions over and above your 5%, those voluntary contributions can be anywhere from 0.5% to 4%. And if you make those voluntary contributions, your employer puts in additional money into that part of the plan too. So if you put in 0.5% or 1% in voluntary contributions, it's matched dollar for dollar by your employer. And if you put in from 1.5 to 4, the match is 50%. So if you put in that full 4% voluntary contribution, you're getting an additional 2.5% employer match. Your voluntary money in that part of the plan goes into an account called the hybrid 457 deferred comp account. The employer money, both the mandatory, your 1% mandatory, the employer 1% mandatory, and the employer match on your voluntary all goes into the hybrid 401(a) cash match account.
Thank you, Sally. Sally did a very nice job of breaking down where the monies go, but we know folks learn in different ways. So I'm going to walk through this table that you have here on screen, and we can visualize everything that Sally just said from a contribution standpoint. Whoops. Okay. It didn't do what I expected it to do. So I will talk about it a little bit differently. So again, the mandatory contribution in total is 5%. 4%, as you can see, regardless of the contribution level that you make, the 4% mandatory goes into the defined benefit component, or DB. And then you have your 1% mandatory. So that's how that 5% is arrived at there. Now, you also see the employer mandatory. So this column and this column are the employer monies that can go to the hybrid 401(a) cash match plan. I believe we're holding questions to the end. Thank you. Okay. So I'm saying that this column and this column are the employer monies that go into the hybrid 401(a) cash match. Here is the employee voluntary contribution. First is the 0.5% that Sally mentioned. And the maximum that you can do is this 4%, as you see down here. Here is the employer matching contribution. So whatever you do as a voluntary contribution, you get the corresponding match over here. Now, something else that you want to be aware of when it comes to the voluntary contributions is that the voluntary contribution is processed on a quarterly processing cycle. So right now, we are in the 4th quarter. And if you were in the plan already and you wanted to make a contribution change, a voluntary contribution change, if you did that by December 15th, that is the next contribution cutoff period. So basically the last quarter of the month, the 15th of that month is the cutoff for contribution changes. Any contribution changes made during that quarter will be effective first pay period of the following quarter. So contributions made anytime between now and December 15th would be effective first pay period in January, and so on. So what are some of the benefits of increasing the contributions to the hybrid plan? So again, looking at the table, what you want to take advantage of is having the maximum amount of money you can have going into the plan to take advantage of compound investment earnings. It is through the compound earnings that the money grows. So whether you just do the mandatory contribution or if you do the maximum 4% voluntary contribution and tap into the maximum employer contributions. This is based on a 30-year career. The income was $3,000 a month, and it assumed that the investment earnings averaged 6% a year. So based on that, this is how the money can grow. And you'll notice that whatever the contribution combination was, the largest component of that bar was from the compound investment earnings. That's why you want to tap into having as much money as possible going into the voluntary contribution side or going into the defined contribution component, because that's where the employer matching money and mandatory contribution also goes, so that you can have maximum dollars going toward your retirement. And remember, the DB, the defined benefit component, is the foundation. This is what you have the opportunity to create to go on top of that DB foundation. Now, as I just said, your objective is to get to the 4% maximum as soon as your budget will allow. But we also recognize that not everyone is going to be able to go right to 4% immediately. So that's why we have something called Smart Step. Smart Step is a contribution process that allows you to make gradual voluntary contribution increases that are pre-scheduled to occur once a year. So what you do is you set the amount that you want that contribution increase to be. Again, the contributions are done in the 0.5% increments. Excuse me. Yeah, 0.5% increments. And you decide which contribution processing quarter that you want it to take effect. Once you set up Smart Step, that will continue to run until you either change it or you reach the 4% maximum voluntary contribution. Smart Step is a wonderful program, but it sometimes is confused with auto escalation, which is a plan, which is a plan provision of the hybrid plan. With auto escalation, this impacts everyone that is in the hybrid plan that is not at the 4% voluntary contribution level. Every 3 years, auto escalation occurs, and it occurs in the last quarter of the year and is effective in January of the following year. And if someone is not already at 4%, they will automatically be escalated from wherever they are by 0.5%.
In that column so that people on the virtual audience can understand which column. So we're talking about the before versus the.
Do you want me to go back?
Oh, no, not yet. That's okay.
Okay,
So
so
for
this
for
slide,
this slide, so when we're talking about the 0.5%, it's the before column, right?
in terms of the increments. Okay.
Yes, okay.
So here on auto escalation, before auto escalation, again, wherever you are in terms of the amount of voluntary contribution you are doing. And again, that cutoff is December 15th of that year that auto escalation is going to occur. So let's say you're at 2% before auto escalation. December 15th comes, you took no action. So first pay period in January, when you get your check, your voluntary contribution will have increased after auto escalation by 0.5% and will now be 2.5% in this example. That will occur for everyone wherever they are, unless they are already at the 4% maximum. And that's because no one can contribute more than 4% as a voluntary contribution in the hybrid retirement plan. So as I said before, your goal is to get to the 4% as soon as you can. Auto escalation is a process to help you get there. If you take no action, you eventually will get to the 4% maximum because of the auto escalation provision, which occurs every 3 years. So as you see on the slide, we're in October of 2023. So in January of this year is the last time the auto escalation provision kicked in. So in some ways, we don't have to worry about auto escalation until 2026. But you do want to be aware that it's there, and you do not want to confuse it with Smart Step. Smart Step, you control. Auto escalation is for the entire plan. So let's talk a little bit about why you should save. Again, this is going to be your primary retirement plan if you move into the hybrid plan. It has a combination of a traditional pension, monthly income for the rest of your life, as well as an investment component on top of that to provide additional retirement income. As you see on the slide, average annual Social Security benefit in 2021 was less than $20,000 a year. The income from your VRS pension, that's the defined benefit component, the DB component, is going to depend on salary, age, and years of creditable service. So we've looked at this model as a way to categorize retirement income. Many folks have a pension, again, that lifetime income. Social Security, also a source of lifetime income. And then there would be additional savings that one might have that you are earmarking toward retirement. That could be savings in retirement plans, such as the defined contribution component of the hybrid plan, such as the 401A plan that you may already be participating in or participate in. It may be IRA accounts, traditional IRAs, Roth IRAs. All of these are accounts that are earmarked for retirement. So they would fit under that third leg of the stool there. But what we have been finding in recent years is that these three legs may not provide all of the retirement income that someone may need. So they need to come up with a way, and we call that, when there is a difference there, we call that a retirement income gap. And what folks need to do if they have a gap is to find ways to fill that gap. One of the ways that that gap is being filled is by something called supplemental income. Guess what, folks? Supplemental income is working. That could be part-time, that could be full-time. But the fact is, you go back into the workforce to earn more money to close that retirement income gap. So that's why it's important to save, because we want to get you to a place where you don't have that income gap. You don't have to go back to work. Now, notice I just said has to go back to work. That's what we're talking about in the retirement income gap. I'm not talking about the situation because you just love your coworkers so much, you would not know what to do with yourself if you were to leave them, so you come back in some capacity. That's not what I'm talking about, because you're doing that because you want to, not because you have to. Again, this is another example of the importance of savings and the role that compound investment earnings play. So if possible, you want to be more like Sarah. She started young. She started at age 25. You see what she contributed into the plan. And she stopped contributing after 15 years when she reached age 40, but she left her money in the plan to continue to receive the compound investment earnings. And you see what she was able to get. Again, this is the investment side only, when she reached age 65. The gentleman, Michael, on the other hand, he didn't start contributing until age 40 when Sarah stopped, contributed for 25 years, contributed significantly more than Sarah did, and at the end of the day, at retirement at age 65, he got less. The investment was the same, the investment performance was the same, the salary was the same. The difference was the number of years that they were invested in the plan. So it's not so much how much you contribute, it's more getting started in the program and staying with it and letting it start to work for you. Now, all of the contributions in the hybrid retirement plan are pre-tax contributions, and they reduce your current taxable income. So the bottom line is here, the bottom line. Your take-home pay is impacted to a smaller degree based on the contribution amount. So in this example, 30,000 annual pay, the before tax or pre-tax contribution is 1,800. So that comes off the top of your salary, and you are only taxed on a lesser amount. That's how you get the current tax reduction. And then as you follow down the column, the before tax column, you see what the impact is on the tax rate and what that results in terms of the net income or the take-home pay. And as you can see, with pre-tax or before tax contributions, your take-home pay ends up being a little bit more than if you do the contributions after tax. Now, again, you don't have a choice. Your contributions in the hybrid plan are only pre-tax, but you do get that benefit of having more take-home pay. Now, we've talked about getting money in through contributions. And again, the contributions are done only through payroll deduction. You cannot add outside money to the plan from a contribution standpoint, but you can do a rollover of a prior retirement plan that you are no longer part of, no longer working for them. You can also do traditional IRAs as a rollover. So these are the plan types that are eligible to be rolled into the hybrid 457. In the hybrid retirement plan, again, you've got the DB component, you've got the DC component, which has the hybrid 401k cash match and the hybrid 457. Rollovers of other plans can only go into the hybrid 457. Again, this is where you make your voluntary contributions. You cannot roll anything into the hybrid 401k cash match. You will probably have opportunity to make additional supplemental savings in a 457 plan. And that's where you would want to reach out to Benefits or Human Resources to see what may be available in that regard. So again, the DC component is the tax deferred savings and investment plan. So since we've got an investment plan, there probably are some investment options. The investment option in the VRS defined contribution plans are based on these primary asset categories: cash equivalents and stable value investments. These are short-term, highly liquid securities that pay interest. Here, this is not the growth engine that I talked about with the compound investment earnings. Here, the objective is to preserve the value. So these are low risk, low return investment options. Next would be bonds. Bonds are in a marketplace, but the bond marketplace is not as volatile as the stock marketplace, and the bond market provides diversification. Diversification is basically that old adage that I think many of us here in the room know about not having all of your eggs in one basket. Here we're talking about your financial eggs. So by having them spread around in different asset classes or diversified, you give yourself a better opportunity to be successful in reaching your investment objectives. And the reason I say opportunity to be successful is because there are no guarantees. And the bonds and the stocks are in a marketplace. The market goes up, the market goes down. So there is no guarantee that at the end of the day, you will be successful in having growth in your plan. But if you have diversification, that is our best tool to manage risk. All investments have some type of risk, but diversification allows us to manage that risk. The other reason that bonds are important from a diversification standpoint is that they generally will operate opposite stocks. Stocks are the growth engine, but you need to get that moderation and that diversification. So oftentimes, the majority of the time, when stocks are performing strongly, bonds are not performing as strongly. But there are times where it does flip. Bonds are the stronger performers, and then stocks would not be performing as well. So by having some on both sides, you still give yourself a better opportunity to continue to manage that upward trajectory, which is what you are trying to achieve. And then last are stocks. Stocks are shares of ownership in a company. They have the highest potential for growth, but they also have the higher degree of risk. But this is how, again, that 6% figure that I talked about earlier in terms of the average growth rate, that comes from investing in a stock portfolio, and that is based on the historical returns dating back to, I believe it's 1926, since they started tracking this stuff. So it wasn't just a number that was pulled out of thin air, but that came from a stock portfolio. So specifically in the VRS defined contribution plans, there are 3 strategies or pathways that you are eligible to use. The first is the do it for me path. Each of these 10 investment options, the retirement portfolio through the target date 2065 portfolio, are diversified portfolios in and of themselves in that single investment option. All of the target date portfolios use the same underlying asset classes. They are just in different proportion. And it is the target date year that the portfolio managers use to do that allocation of the underlying asset classes. So if you are just starting your employment journey like Sarah, the 2065 portfolio is 99% growth oriented because you have a nice long time horizon to ride the wave, ride the roller coaster of the stocks going up and down. But if you are closer to retirement age, so this is folks that would be age 65 or closest there to prior to age 20, to the year 2025. So they're like a retirement age now. That portfolio is a more moderate portfolio, but it does still contain some growth-oriented assets in the portfolio because it is through growth that you manage inflation. Inflation is the big challenge for retirement income. And we really don't want to focus on age 65. We don't want to get you to retirement. We want to get you through retirement. And that's where you need the growth in the later years because of the impacts of inflation. Now, that's the first strategy. And that also is the default investment option. And the reason I say default is this is a mandatory program. So when you come into the program, it's going to start up immediately. And when we receive the first contribution, we are required by regulation to invest that money immediately. We cannot wait to hear from you and you tell us what you want to do. Yes, it is a self-managed program, but we have to get you started. So we're going to start you in the target date portfolio based on these 5-year increments that corresponds to when you would be age 65 or closest thereto without going over. As soon as you have the opportunity, you can tell us what you want to do. You can say, hey, target date portfolio, the default's good for me. Let's go. Or you might say, oh, you could choose another target date portfolio also. You can use any of them, but you're going to be defaulted into the one close to age 65. Or you might say, you know what? I really want to be a little bit more hands-on with my investments for my retirement. Hey, it's your retirement. Who could blame you for wanting to do that? So here you have the help me do it strategy where you pick these individual asset classes. Oh, let me back up one second. I forgot one other key point with the target date portfolio. I already talked about how all the way out, it's almost 100% growth. Retirement portfolio is a more moderate investment. But what I forgot to say, which is very important, is that wherever you are, when you start in the target date portfolio, it is gradually adjusting that overall risk so that by the time you reach whatever that default is, let's say you would default to the 2040 portfolio. As you're on that journey from now until 2040, the portfolio is gradually getting more moderate so that by the time you do get to 2040, that entire portfolio is going to roll into the retirement portfolio. The 25, the 30, and the 35 will have already done that in their respective year when that was reached. But that's how the process works. So not only is it a diversified portfolio, but it also adjusts the risk level of the entire portfolio. Now, having said that, I can move on because here in the Help Me Do It strategy, these are individual investment options. You can invest in one, you can invest in several. But in terms of the risk level, you would have to do a process called rebalancing and do that over time. So the first two, the money market fund and the stable value fund, are your conservative options. You have 3 bond fund choices. And then the stock fund, small mid cap, international stock fund, and global real estate. These are your growth engines. And I want to touch on this last one here, the VRS investment portfolio. This is a unitized investment of the VRS trust fund, and it has been made available for the VRS defined contribution plans. Now, some of you are probably saying, oh, VRS investment portfolio, that's the last one listed. It must be the most growth-oriented portfolio. Not so. It's listed here because of its uniqueness. It has some restrictions that the other investment options do not have. The other investment options, you can change, move in and out in terms of transfer the fund balances pretty much on a daily basis. Now, you wouldn't want to do that. The program is not designed for day trading, but it's valued daily, so you could move it daily. The VRS investment portfolio is unique in that it is only valued on a quarterly basis, and you can only get into or out of this investment option, the VRSIP as we call it, on a quarterly basis after it's gone through the quarterly valuation cycle. So that's why it's listed last, because it has some restrictions. You also are not eligible to invest in it until you have a balance in the plan of $2,500, a minimum balance. These 2 strategies make up the core investment options. There is a third strategy, as I mentioned, called the do-it-myself path. This is the self-directed brokerage account option. This is intended for folks who are knowledgeable and comfortable with investing and are willing to take all of the risk. The core investment options, VRS is the plan fiduciary. They have a responsibility to provide a diversified portfolio at reasonable cost. So they are constantly doing due diligence to make sure the investments are appropriate. In the self-directed brokerage account, there is no due diligence. VRS as the plan sponsor, Mission Square Retirement as the third-party record keeper, City of Richmond as the participating employer making the plan available. None of those folks do any due diligence on the investments in the portfolio. So if you go the self-directed brokerage route, it's all on you. If you do a great job and make a gazillion dollars, congratulations. Also expect my call because I'll be looking for the help. But if you do a not so good job and you lose it all, that's on you too. Also some restrictions here, again, at least 2,500 in a core balance, plus trades and transactions are done in minimum increments of $1,000. So you would need to have 3,500 total to get started in the self-directed brokerage account. You can utilize all 3 strategies, mix and match, but this is a self-managed program. You decide how you want to invest your money. Couple of fees you want to be aware of. There is a record keeping fee of $2.54 a month. It is deducted from the account balance. And if you have more than one VRS defined contribution plan, you pay 1 record keeping fee. I know we said we were going to hold the question to the end, but I can't resist. How many plans do you have? Defined contribution plans do you have? Somebody shout out the answer to me. I heard of 2. That is correct. You got 2 plans, you pay 1 record keeping fee. The other fee that you want to be aware of are the investment management fees or the expense ratio. This is attached to the investment options, and this is not something that you pay out of pocket. It is built into the pricing of the fund and the share price. The net fee is what you see, what you pay. These fees are exceptionally low, and that's how you get the money to grow. The low investment management fees means more money that goes into your account at the end of the day. I'm going to turn it back over to Sally, and she's going to talk more about the benefit payments and distribution of it.
So Stephen's been talking about that investment component. Remember, that's the defined contribution part of the plan where you're going to put in money, employer puts in money to manage those investments. But we're going to turn our attention now back to the defined benefit part of the plan. This again is the foundation of the plan that provides the lifetime monthly pension benefit when you meet the age and service requirements. You have to have at least 5 years of service credit with the VRS to be vested in this part of the plan. The benefit that you receive from this part of the plan has no relationship to the amount of money you contribute. So remember, you're making that mandatory 4% contribution that goes into your member contribution account. Your benefit has nothing to do with how much money you paid in. Your benefit is based on a formula. That formula is 1% times your years of service credit times your average final compensation. Average final compensation is a 5-year average. It's the average of the 60 consecutive months of salary in your VRS history that gives the highest average. Not the last 5, but the 5 highest consecutive 60 months. So it's 1% times your years of service credit under the VRS times your average final compensation. Divide by 12, get a monthly benefit. That is what we call an unreduced benefit. If you retire early, before your unreduced retirement eligibility, there is a reduction factor applied to that calculation to reflect the fact that you're starting your benefit early. To get the full amount of that formula, that unreduced benefit, you can meet that eligibility in one of 2 ways. The first way is to reach your Social Security normal retirement age and have 5 years of service credit. That's your normal retirement age under the plan. You can also get an unreduced benefit if you meet the rule of 90. The rule of 90 says that if your age and service added together totals 90, then you don't have a reduction factor applied when we calculate that benefit formula. So if you are, for example, age 60 with 30 years of service credit, age 58 with 32 years, age 62 with 28 years, as long as your age and service adds up to 90, there is no reduction factor applied. Or if you reach your Social Security normal retirement age and have 5 years of service, you can take a reduced early retirement benefit after you reach age 60 and have at least 5 years of service credit. So unless you meet the rule of 90, the earliest you can retire is after you reach age 60. Whoops. I pushed the wrong button. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. There we go. Thank you. Okay. So again, the next slide, I pushed the right button. You got it. Is a chart that shows you your Social Security normal retirement age. Again, it's based on your year of birth. If you're born in 1960 or later, your Social Security normal retirement age is age 67. So again, that is how you determine that unreduced retirement date if you don't meet the rule of 90. When we calculate that benefit using the formula, that is what we call basic benefit. That monthly benefit is payable to you for your lifetime, as long as you live. And after you pass away, the benefit stops and nothing else is payable. When you get to retirement age and you decide to retire, you will have other options available to you. There is a survivor option where you can elect to have someone receive a benefit after your death for their lifetime. If you select that option, there is a reduction applied to that calculation to reflect the fact we're going to pay benefits after your death to someone else. The partial lump sum option payment is a special option where you have to meet the requirements to qualify for this option. You have to actually work beyond your unreduced retirement date to qualify for this option. So you have to work at least 1, 2, or 3 years past that unreduced retirement date to get a 1 year, 2 year, or 3 year partial lump sum option payout. In this option, what happens is you get an upfront payment of 1, 2, or 3 years worth of that basic benefit. Because you're getting that paid in lump sum upfront, your monthly benefit then is reduced to reflect the fact that you've gotten that partial payment upfront. You can take the partial lump sum option payment in conjunction with the survivor option. So there would be a reduction for both taking the lump sum as well as for taking the survivor option. The advanced pension option is a standalone option. You cannot take this in combination with any other option. The advanced pension option is designed for people who start their benefit prior to their Social Security normal retirement age. It allows you to get a temporarily increased benefit for a certain period of time. And then at the date you've chosen, when you think you're going to start your Social Security benefit, there is a permanent reduction. And this is designed so that if you retire early, you can have a more level income stream before and after when you think you're going to start Social Security payments. One question that frequently comes up is, well, what happens if I leave employment before I retire? What happens if I'm ready to retire, but I don't want that early retirement reduction? Well, you can leave your member contribution account, or that's your 4% mandatory money at VRS. If you leave that money in your account at VRS, then you can defer retirement or you can become a deferred member. If you are eligible for retirement, you still keep other retiree benefits like your retiree life insurance. You're just deferring receipt of the monthly benefit. If you are vested, meaning if you got your 5 years of service credit, but you don't meet retirement eligibility, as long as you leave your money in the plan, you keep your rights to that lifetime benefit that you earn, that benefit that's calculated based on whatever your salary history and your years of service credit are. Even if you are not vested, and let's say you only had 2 years of service credit and you leave, as long as you leave that member contribution account in the plan, you are a deferred member of the plan. And if you've left that money in the plan and you later come back to a VRS covered position, then you can go back into the plan and pick up where you left off. But suppose you don't want to leave that money. Well, it's your money that you've been contributing. We're just talking about your 4% mandatory. It's your money. You can always take that money out. That is called taking a refund, but there are implications if you take a refund. It's your choice. You can leave the money in the plan and keep your benefits, your service, but if you want to take that money out, you can. Taking a refund means that you forfeit all of your VRS benefits. If you are eligible to retire, you will forfeit your retirement benefit as well as any other retiree benefits you might be entitled to. If you are vested, you will forfeit the lifetime benefit you have earned. And regardless of whether you're vested or not, if you take a refund, you will forfeit all of your VRS service credit and your VRS membership. Then if you later come back to a VRS covered position, you start all over again, zero service, and you will be in whatever plan is in effect when you come back. So over time, if the legislature has made changes to these plans, so if you take a refund, you lose your membership and service credit. When you come back, you'll be in whatever plan is the current plan when you return. The other thing you have to remember about taking a refund is, as Stephen mentioned, all the money put in the plan is pre-tax. So you would have to have a tax decision to make too if you take a refund. You can roll the money over like to a traditional IRA and defer the taxes. You make a taxable distribution, you're going to pay regular income tax, potentially an additional 10% tax for taking the funds out early unless you need an exception under the tax code. And taxable distributions that that aren't rolled over would be subject to upfront 20% federal and 4% Virginia tax withholding. In addition, if you take a refund, you potentially are going to forfeit part of the money in the defined contribution part.
So,
Nothing.
well, you can say that. Same time as you. So you're probably getting the sense that there are pretty much two of everything in the hybrid retirement plan. You've got two components, DB, DC. You got two representatives, two different companies, and you also have two vesting schedules. So you're very familiar with the vesting for the DB side, 5 years of creditable service. The employer money on the defined contribution side was feeling a little left out. So there's a vesting schedule for that money only. So here, you don't have ownership. That's the key. That's what vesting on the defined contribution side means. You don't have ownership of any of the employer money. Again, that's 1% mandatory employer contribution and any employer matching contributions based on your voluntary contributions. You don't own the employer money until you have completed 2 years of service. At that point, you get ownership of half of the employer money, 50%. Say 3 years, you're now up to 75%. Say 4 years, you're at 100% ownership of the employer money. Now, you are always 100% vested in any monies you pay into the hybrid plan. Again, that's the 4% mandatory to the DB, the 1% mandatory to the hybrid 401k cash match, and up to the 4% voluntary that you pay in for voluntary contributions. So when it comes to vesting, the simple way to approach it, stay 5 years. You're vested in the pension and you're vested on the employer money. Distributions. Sally talked about the different distribution options on the DB side of things. On the DC side of things, you can kind of think of it a couple of ways. There are more options, if you will, more ways that you can put it together than on the DB side of things, or you can look at it as less. And the reason I say you can look at it as less is because it's only the money that's in the account. There's no formula. There's no reductions of it. It's you leave, you've been gone for 1 full calendar month. And notice I said leave. I didn't say retire. Once you are no longer an active employee with a VRS participating employer, you have access to the monies in your defined contribution component. Just as the investments are self-managed, you will decide the how and the when that you take the money out. You can set up another periodic distribution that can be monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, or annually. You can just do a partial lump sum distribution. I need $5,000 to put the roof on, a new roof on the house. You can go in and get that if you're eligible for a distribution. You also can roll money out to another employer plan, a traditional IRA. You can even roll directly to a Roth IRA. Now, you roll to a Roth IRA, there will be some tax implications, but you won't deal with those tax implications until after you've done that distribution. You can purchase an annuity, another source of lifetime income. That's one of your distribution options. As I said, You will control the how and the when. Now, something that is unique to 457 plans. Sally mentioned that you might be subject to an early distribution, additional 10% penalty. That also applies to the hybrid 401A cash match plan. But that never applies to the hybrid 457. So what some folks have done is they've retired early. Medicare doesn't kick in until 65. They want to be able to manage their health insurance until they're Medicare eligible. Sometimes they'll tap into their 457 monies because there's no penalty tax, and that's prior to 59 and a half. In terms of, you can't get it from the 401 until you're after 59 and a half, but you can get it from the 457 at any time. Let's talk about some other things you want to consider.
Okay, so now we're going to switch back over to the defined benefit part of the plan where you get the lifetime monthly pension benefit. Remember that lifetime monthly pension benefit is based on the formula. And one of the components of that formula is your years of service credit under the VRS. There are certain ways you can purchase service and have it added to your VRS record. There are a lot of special rules about purchasing service. You can't just purchase service because you want to purchase service. There are special rules. First of all, you have to be active. And when you purchase service that goes in your record, it's used to calculate the amount of your monthly benefit. It is also used to determine vesting for both parts of the plan. You cannot be entitled to a benefit from another retirement system based on this service. There are certain types of service that are unlimited, meaning you can buy as much of it as is available to you. These types listed here are unlimited. Refunded service is when we talked a little bit earlier about taking a refund where you leave and you take your money out of your defined benefit member contribution account. You do that and forfeit your service and your benefits. If you have done that in the past and you come back into the hybrid plan, you can purchase all of that refunded service that is available to you. And then if you go on a military leave, when you come back, you can apply for no cost military leave. That is not limited. And then there are certain times when you might have service time lost when you're on workers' comp. And when you come back, all of that service is available for purchase. The types of service listed here are limited, meaning you can't buy all of it. The 6 types listed here, the public service, federal service, non-covered service, and then those 3 types of leave. All of those types of service combined, if you buy anything in any of those categories, you are limited to 48 months total in all of those categories. So let's say you wanted to buy 2 years of public service and then you had a year of leave and maybe a year of federal service. You can buy that in different categories, but you can never buy over a total of 48 months. Public service is like if you worked in government, like another state. Let's say you had service with a state agency in a different state. That is service you would have to apply for. But this is all full-time salary service. Federal service is civilian service with the federal government. Non-covered service would be like if you work for a VRS employer and at the time you work for that employer, you were not in a VRS covered position. For example, it was part-time, so you weren't covered for benefits. There are processes you have to go through to get the service added to your record. For things like the federal service and the public service, you have to remove all funds from the retirement system and forfeited all benefits from that retirement system before you can apply for the service. And then again, remember, you're limited to that total 48 months from all of these categories combined. One other category of service you can purchase is active duty military service. Again, if you're not entitled to a military retirement pension, you can purchase up to 48 months of active duty military service. To buy service, you have to pay for it. We'll talk about refunded service in a moment, but other than refunded service, all of those types of service that you can buy, you have a 2-year window from when you're first eligible to purchase it, that you can purchase that service at the plan's approximate normal cost rate. That rate is the cost of a year of service for the entire plan. I think right now it's 6.78%. It's on the web, posted on the website on the hybrid section, but it's a known rate that you know if you purchase it within that 2-year window, you know what the cost is going to be. After that 2-year window, anything you have not purchased is going to be at an actuarial cost. An actuarial cost is going to be a more individualized calculation. So look at your specific record, your age, when you can retire. If you purchase this service, does it mean you can retire sooner? So it's much more individualized and it can be more expensive. Refunded service is different. There's no cost window for that. If you have refunded service available, you can purchase it at any time. The cost for refunded service is you have to repay the amount of the refund you received plus interest. The interest is compounded annually from when you took the refund to when you pay it back. So if you took it a long time ago, it's going to have a lot of interest added to it, but you can purchase that. And we can do those calculations for you after you are a VRS member if you have any of that available. And I think that rate is 6.75%. The rate on that changes to periodic. You can pay for a service in a variety of methods. You can pay in a lump sum. You can write a personal check. You can roll over funds from an IRA. You can set up a payroll deduction where it comes out of your check every pay period. You can do a combination of a payroll agreement and a lump sum. So there are a lot of ways that you can pay for this service if you have that available to you. Another thing we want to talk about in terms of benefits under the hybrid plan, the VSDP is available only for state employees, so that does not apply to you, but you do have the Virginia Local Disability Program that you would be covered under the hybrid plan. This is a plan that provides short-term and long-term disability benefits. It focuses on getting you back to work. And one of the things that we like to mention is if you change VRS employers, you need to be aware that the Virginia Sickness and Disability Program is for state employees. The VLDP, the Virginia Local Disability Program, is for like schools and political subdivisions. Not all schools and political subdivisions offer this plan. Some of them offer a comparable plan. And so your benefits can vary if you change VRS employers. In these plans, there is a 1-year waiting period before you are eligible for any non-work related short-term disability benefits. So that starts when you first become eligible under the VRS. If you change VRS employers, you have to resatisfy that 1-year waiting period. So just be aware of that, as you progress through your career, if you make any employment changes. Both the VSDP and the VLDP do provide some long-term care coverage. In the hybrid plan, you also are covered by your basic life insurance, which is your base pay rounded up 1,000 times 2. And there are also accidental death and dismemberment benefits available. And you also have the option to purchase optional life insurance for yourself, your spouse, and your dependent children. And there's a lot more detail on these benefits on the website, but just be aware you're eligible for these benefits under the hybrid plan. Another benefit we want to talk about is the death in service benefit. This is what happens if you pass away while you are active. And this benefit depends on several factors. It depends on whether or not your death is work-related or non-work-related. It depends on whether or not you're vested, meaning whether or not you have 5 years of service credit. And it depends in some situations on who you've named as your beneficiary. I'd like to sort of spend a little bit of time on this because it's not intuitive. On life insurance, you name a beneficiary, and if you pass away, the beneficiary that you name gets money. In the death in service, again, this is only for active. If you pass away while you're active, if you are vested and you have named a spouse, minor child, or parent, in that order of precedence, they take precedence over everyone else. So for example, if you were to name a spouse and a parent equally, and you are vested and you pass away from a non-work related reason, only the spouse gets a benefit. Parent gets nothing. Spouse takes precedence in that order, and they get a choice of a monthly benefit or a refund of what's in your member contribution account. If you are not vested, then it's just going to be a refund. What's in your account will be paid to whoever you named as your beneficiary. If it's a work-related cause of death, then the refund is payable to whoever you named as your beneficiary, and then your spouse, minor child, or parent, whichever occurs in that order of precedence, would get a monthly benefit. You want to make sure you've made beneficiary designations for your life insurance and your member contribution account in the defined benefit component of the plan. And then on the defined contribution part of the plan,
I mentioned that for the defined contribution plans, it is simply the balance that is in your account. You also need to name your beneficiaries for the defined contribution component. We'll talk a little bit more in just a moment about how you do that, but the best way to do it is going to be through your DC online access.
speaking of, we're now going to talk about some resources that are available to you. First thing we want to talk about is the hybrid public website. That's at this www.varetire.org/hybrid. This is a public website. You can go on this website and get a lot of information about the plan. There's a link to just some general overall financial information, but also a lot of information about the hybrid plan itself. When you go to this public website, there will be a place for you to log in. There are 2 logins, as there are 2 parts to the plan, and your money's at 2 different places. So there are 2 separate login accounts for you to set up. The first one listed is called DCP Account Access, which is for the DCP component of the plan. The other one is the My VRS Access, which is the account that links to the VRS. We're going to talk about the My VRS for just a moment. Login page, and when you get to your login page, your home page on the hybrid plan is going to show you your balance in all of your accounts. This is the only place where you will see your balance in the member contribution account, that defined benefit 4%. We show you your balances in your accounts at Mission Square just for reference purposes. We will tell you what your current voluntary contribution rate is, but you can't do any transactions for the defined contribution part of the plan in your MyVRS account. It's informational only for defined contribution information. We will show you an estimate of your unreduced retirement date and benefit. There is a benefit estimator tool where you can do retirement estimates at different points in time. There is a retirement planner tool. There is a link to financial wellness where you can get general financial information like the insurance and credit, things like that. When you're ready to retire, you can actually retire online. It takes you through step by step through the process. Then if you go to the DCP account access.
Thank you. So this is what you will see after you have created your defined contribution login and you log into your account. It'll bring you to the dashboard here. As you see, 2 plans that you have on the DC component. And then you go to this drop-down menu. And this is where you would go to manage your voluntary contributions. There you go for a second. Manage your voluntary contributions is the drop-down. This is where you would go to update your beneficiary information. This is where you come to manage your investments between the 3 different pathways that you have available. All of that is done here through your defined contribution account access. This is our team of DC plan specialists located in 6 regions around the Commonwealth, as well as a virtual representative that worked with a lot of our retired members working with them online. You also have access to the mobile app so that you can manage your account on your smartphone. Search for VRS space DCP in your appropriate app store.
Go back real quick.
We've got a lot of folks interested in taking your retirement on the go. I like that. Contact information for both components of the plan. Here's the defined benefit side of things, the defined contribution side of things. And here, when you call the 800 number and select option 1, you can reach our participant services team, and they are available Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. until 9:00 p.m. Eastern time, whenever the New York Stock Exchange is open. You can also reach my team. You just saw our pictures there at option 2. And convenient for you all, since you all are here in Richmond, but we also have a walk-in service center downtown Richmond where you can get assistance in managing the plan as well.
And on the VRS side, be aware our walk-in counseling center is, you need an appointment. So on Tuesdays and Wednesdays only.
Really?
As a hybrid retirement plan member and a VRS member, you have access to certified financial planning professionals that work for Mission Square Retirement. Now, this team is not the education team. We are not the financial planners, but you have an opportunity to have a consultation with the CFP professional to address some of these topics and more. This is the website for the financial planning services. And when you set up your defined contribution login, if you scroll down the page about halfway or so, you will actually see this banner on your page. And this banner is this website link.
Okay, so we're going to refer you once again back to this public website. Again, for the public website, you don't have to have any login. You can just go out there and review this information. A lot of good information about the hybrid plan. There is a link to the handbook for the hybrid retirement plans. There is a learning channel. It has some very short videos on it. There are recorded webinars. There's this very similar to this presentation we've done today, and also upcoming sessions that you might register for. And to sort of sum up, we've talked about a lot of information today, lots of information. So kind of some reminders, when you're in the hybrid plan, you want to make sure you've registered for your My VRS account. Use that to set up your beneficiaries for your life insurance and your DB member contribution account. Consider life insurance, long-term care needs in case you need to look at buying additional insurance somewhere. If you're eligible to purchase service, we encourage you to look into that sooner rather than later. You're not obligated to buy it, but it doesn't hurt to find out what it might do for you, what the cost might be. We would encourage you to make sure you've set up also your DCP account access for your defined contribution accounts. Always want you to try to maximize those voluntary contributions to 4%. After you've maximized at 4% in the hybrid plan, you're getting all of your employer match. Then you have other opportunities to save more. And then make sure you name beneficiaries for that part of the plan, and make sure you're keeping track of your investment options in case you need to make changes to those. Okay.
All right, so we will begin taking questions. So as I mentioned, just to reiterate the ground rules for everybody, we will take 3 questions from in-person, 3 questions from virtual. We have a virtual facilitator, Jeff Crawford, who will be managing the virtual question asking process. And so if you have a question about your personal situation, use discretion, but we have a transition questions email box where you can ask a personal question about your own scenario. So try to keep these a little bit more general if possible. And remember to ask your entire question up front. We're not doing follow-up questions. So we will start with 3 questions from the in-person group, and I will repeat them so the virtual audience can hear. Sir, right here, closest to me, with your hand raised. Yes.
I just wanted to know, when we sign up for this, it automatically takes out of the RFS, or is that something we have to do separately?
When we sign up for VRS, is that something that we have to sign up for separately? Is that, am I hearing correctly?
Yeah. I'm already in the RFS,
Yes.
so when I have, so a year to choose or whatever.
Mhm.
I'm gonna choose this one, so. How do I do that? Like, how do I actually transition between those two?
So the question is, how do you transition? Great question. We have a process that we're working out with HR and retirement where you will complete a form. There is a transition website. Currently it is up. There is a form page on the website and the forms will be coming soon. They will be linked there and available. You will turn in your form to either HR or retirement, and you'll sit down with them and talk through the scenario because, you know, you may have specific situation that needs to be discussed. And from there, HR will enroll you in VRS if you are transitioning. And that way you will have an account that you will go into on the website, which VRS has just talked about. We will provide more information on the website about that. So the website, just to refer everybody, the website is www.rva.gov/retirement-transition. It was in the latest email that was sent out from the transition questions email box as an update on this presentation today. So if you scroll down in the email, you can click that link and find the website. Okay, next question.
Prior to that, plan of 90, what's the reduction factor?
Okay, so is there a reason why the maximum voluntary contributions is 4% and 4% only? And then if I retire prior to the rule of 90, what happens? Did I get it? Oh, what's the reduction factor?
Okay, thank you. So the plan provisions are set by the legislature. That's the easy answer. I mean, that's the answer. That's the way the legislature set up the plan, and they limited it to 4% for the voluntary contributions. That's just the way the plan is designed. For when you retire, there's no table exactly I can give you. I can tell you that on that public website, if you retire early, there is a place on the public website where there is what we call a generic calculator, where you could put in information that you're in the hybrid plan, your date of birth, when you're going to retire, how much service you have, what you think your average final compensation is. You can run calculations on that generic website with different scenarios, and it will sort of show you the difference and what the benefits would be depending on the things the parameters you put in.
Does that, I tried that, does that say when I'm putting into it, or does that say when I'm getting out of it once I retire?
That calculator is giving you what your benefit will be when you retire. Remember on that defined benefit part of the plan, it's the 1% times your years of service times your average final compensation. The money that you have contributed, I didn't repeat the question, I'm sorry. The money that you have contributed is there to help fund your lifetime benefit. So your benefit you receive is based on the formula. You're going to receive that benefit for as long as you live. So on the defined benefit part of the plan, we calculate the benefit using the formula. We pay it out of your member contribution account. When your money runs out of your member contribution account, you receive that benefit for as long as you live because it's funded by that big trust fund that the VRS is managing. So it's a lifetime benefit based on the formula. Your money is just sort of set aside to help pay for that on the defined benefit part.
Next question.
What happens to the time that I already have here, contributions I've already made for squares?
Okay, so what happens to the time that you have with RRS, correct? With RRS? What happens to the time built up in that this person has worked here and the defined contribution piece of that in Mission Square? So, hey, Kia, do you want to take that one? Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Hey, Kia, by the way, Kia Johnson here from Richmond Retirement.
Yeah, so what happens if you transition to VRS, the time that you had with the Richmond retirement system freezes, so you still have access to that time, but it's just now you get to start days on with VRS. So it stops at the time that you move, and then once you separate from the city altogether, you'll have access to it.
So we're back with.
Oh, yeah, the money is, doesn't say, the money's frozen in Mission Square, does not go anywhere, you can't add to it. Now you're in a new system, and then once you separate from the city altogether, you'll have access to those funds.
So we look at two times, like the VRS and the one from ours.
So you'll have your funds with the Richmond retirement system, and then once you start with VRS, then, and, you know, you get vested, then you'll have funds.
Kia, can you come up
Sorry.
so the virtual audience, we're gonna pause on questions here and take questions. That's okay. We'll take questions from the virtual audience now, Jeff.
All right, first question from the virtual audience from Catherine Bruce. What are the differences between the two plans again? And I want to clarify that this is a presentation for one plan, the hybrid plan, which has two parts, a DC aspect and a DB aspect. Here is a specific question for our partners at Mission Square. Can I roll over a SEP IRA into the 457 account?
Okay, we'll go ahead and take that one.
I don't need to repeat that already, just answer it.
Yes, yeah, they can hear.
Yes, a SEP IRA can be rolled over into the hybrid 457. You would want to work with myself or your local representative that's going to be working with City of Richmond. And we can assist you with the process in completing that rollover, but it is eligible.
Thank you. Margaret Doyle asked, and this is a personal decision question, but I think it's good for the group to hear the answer. I will be retiring in 2026. Is it beneficial for me to switch to VRS? Unfortunately, we cannot answer if it's beneficial. We can provide you with a number of resources to make that decision on your own, and you can ask all different kinds of questions of VRS, but the decision of if it's beneficial is ultimately left up to our employees. Is there any other comment on that from the folks on site?
No, it is your choice. And if you want financial advice, you're encouraged to consult a financial advisor, and make your own decision. Okay. One more, it sounds like we haven't answered 3. So Jeff, one more question.
Sure. From Billy Vaughn with DPU. For the rule of 90, does the years of service mean VRS service or City of Richmond service?
Okay, so all of the benefits in the hybrid plan are based on your service under the VRS. So for that rule of 90, it means your age when you retire and your years of VRS service.
Okay, we'll take 3 questions from the in-person audience, sir. So what's the difference between the two 457 plans? And so, yeah.
So the city has a City of Richmond 457 plan that you can contribute to, and you can continue to contribute to that, even if you decide to go to VRS. we will still keep that 457 alive with your coming out your payroll deductions. So it's two separate plans, but you can continue, but you have to be careful on your IRS tax on those contribution limits.
Can
Yeah,
I add to that?
yeah.
So I remember I said that after you do the 4% maximum, that you would have access to an additional plan. That's the 457 that he had just mentioned. He also mentioned a very key point is that the IRS establishes the annual contribution limit, creating the maximum that can be contributed into 457 plans. So if you come over to VRS and are in the hybrid plan, your hybrid 457 contributions and contributions that you do in the city of Richmond 457, both will be counted toward the applicable annual contribution limit. And as I said at the beginning, that's what I was, part of what I was referring to when I said you may already be familiar with Mission Square Retirement, and me and my team are over on this side with VRS. We know it exists, they know it exists, but we can't talk about the other's plan.
Next question.
I have clarification, like, relates to city of Richmond time. So you mentioned the second check will come from the 4x7, the Mission Square. If they had, so.
What do you mean second? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Second check.
Asked about this time, the city of Richmond, I don't know how many years we have. Okay, so if I have 30 years now, y'all to retire, at this point, I have like 2 more years to learn. To go 67. So what happens with the 30 years city of Richmond, if that's purpose?
Okay, so the question is, if I've worked 30 years and I have 12 more to go, am I hearing that right? Or something like that. You know, you've worked a certain amount of time, you're vested, and you have a certain amount to go. What happens when you switch to the VRS time? Where does that stay or go?
Yeah, where does the 30 years go?
Mhm.
So it stays here with the Richmond retirement system. And then once you if you transition to VRS and you work there for the additional 12 years or whatever, then once you're eligible to retire, once you separate service and you apply for those benefits with the Richmond retirement system, we would calculate your benefit off of those 30 years. If you're in the defined benefit plan.
Yes. So the question was, do I get 2 checks at the end of this? You'll get 2 benefits from each system.
Yes, for fire service purchasing, I'm in the contribution plan under RRS. Can I use those funds that have been contributed to that to roll to purchase fire service? And how would that go about? Would it be a roll over, or would I have to just take the tax hit and then give VRS the money for fire service?
Yeah, can you repeat that? What is that?
I think the question is, can you take money out of the RRS system to use to purchase service under VRS?
Okay, yeah, can you?
Okay, so the question is, can I take time or money out of RRS to use to purchase in VRS? So the answer to that is, in general, no. There's one special group of defined benefit plan non-vested. If you have under 5 years in the defined benefit plan of RRS, there's an exception for you. But in general, everybody else, if you're a DC plan member, you cannot purchase or port your time from RRS into VRS. VRS is, so once you get to VRS, if you choose to transition, they have normal purchase rules, and they have talked about that. But those normal purchase rules do not apply to your city time with RRS. So it applies to other forms potentially of government service, but not your RRS time, correct? Okay. All right, so I think we've answered 3 questions here. Hold your questions. We're gonna go to virtual.
Stephanie Little asks, if you decide to transition to the VRS, what happens to the money that is already invested in the city retirement plan? That's a great question because I think Kia has a great answer for you.
Okay, so what happens is, and I think we've gone through this, is that your money will stay frozen in your Mission Square defined contribution plan. And once you separate service, once you transition, you work for, under the VRS plan. And then once you separate city service, you'll have access to those funds. So it's frozen. You can't put any more money into
How you
it.
get access?
Huh?
When you retire. When you retire,
Either or separate city service. You don't have to retire, but if you can separate
so
from,
y'all keep it in a account.
it's in your Mission Square account.
The interest on that money gonna be spread out to everybody in that account. Or
What do you?
if y'all keep the money.
Sorry, the four.
Can you hold that question? We'll go to another from the virtual. We'll get to you.
I believe this question from Ross Crawford has already been answered, but want to make sure we ask them all. Why can we only put up to 4% in the VRS 457? Since it's capped at that rate, can we continue to put additional money into our 457? Kia, the answer to that is yes, you can, correct?
Can't,
You can put money
but you can put more,
on the city of
you
Richmond.
can put money into the city of Richmond's 457 deferred account. Up to the entire IRS contribution line.
Another question from a fellow finance employee, Alfred. If you already reached retirement age, is there automatic vesting in plan, no matter how many years of credible service?
I'm gonna guess that means in the VRS plan. So the VRS plan, you have to have 5 years of service under the VRS to be eligible for benefits from the defined benefit part of the plan. So you have to have 5 years and reach your Social Security normal retirement. Okay.
All right, thank you, Jeff. All right, so we'll go back to the audience.
Lorraine. How you doing? This is coming by, this is the piggyback of what you just said. Now, as far as VRS, if you had money inside of the VRS, which you have had 5 years, that makes you vested, correct? And you buy 2 years to add it to what we're doing now. If I already have VRS, I only have 3 years. How can I get into that if I'm short of 2 years?
Okay, I think the question is, I already have some service under the VRS. And I want to know how to add to that. So if you already have service under the VRS, in other words, you left your money in VRS, you have service.
Yeah.
Under the hybrid plan, if you elect to come back into the VRS, then you're going to pick up where you left off.
It's just not, it's you need 5 to invest, correct? And
So-
if you only had 3, you need 2 to make your investment.
Right, so if you already have service credit in your VRS record, that is still in your VRS record because you left your money there. If you come back to the VRS, that 3 years is in your record and you start adding to that to get to the 5.
Okay. Next, in the red hat, you had a question earlier.
I'm not saying what I'm saying is, so you're saying to stop, skip over here and money gonna sit in a account, right? And we don't get that money until we retire. In the council, that means gonna accrue interest, well, are we getting that thing, or no interest once we switch over?
Understood. Good question. So the question is for your DC plan account that remains with the city. What happens with interest? Is it still accruing interest or not?
Correct. It will continue gains and losses with the market. So the money was going to stay there, but you can't contribute to it. But there will be gains and losses throughout the time that money's just sitting there.
Okay.
What happens if you stay with the RS?
So the question is, what happens if you stay with RRS?
Then you stay in the plan that you're in, And then come do you know what plan you are in right now? The
Mhm.
contribution plan? Then what happens is there's going to be a new type of format where you have to contribute to that plan in January. So there will be employee contributions that will start in January, and then the employer puts in a portion. So it depends on your credible service on how much the percentages are, but you will be putting in 5%, and the employer will put in the remainder, depending on how many years of service you have.
I guess, do you know what it is right now based on your years of service?
Right now,
If I have 17 years of service, how much do you think I would be getting?
10%.
10%, right? So I'll be losing, I would forfeit that 10%.
If you move to VRS, or if you stay with
If
all,
I stay with RS, would I lose that or would I keep that?
keep it. So now you're going to be giving 5%, and the employer is going to be giving 5%, 10%.
Mhm.
The tenants that we already getting now from the city matching us. And we don't do nothing with it. Now you're gonna drop that to 5% and we got to 6%. Is that what you're saying?
Okay, so there's a question about the contributions. So what, if you remain in RRS, and this goes for everybody, whether or not you've made a decision to transition, to have employees contribute to their retirement, the contributions are changing. So right now, as an employee, I contribute 0, the city contributes 5 for me, right? If you have 15 plus years, the city contributes 10 for you, you contribute 0. What is going to happen in January is your wages will be adjusted to accommodate your increase in contribution. So 5% will go over to me to contribute to retirement, and then the city will contribute 1%, whatever it takes to get that 10%. So if you have 15 plus years, now I'm contributing 5 and the city's contributing the other 5. So total, you're getting 10 still. It's still the same amount. It's just that the contributions have been shifted to you to contribute to your retirement. And so the salary adjustment is so that you don't see a change in your take home, and that the tax increase is mitigated.
You just give it to them.
Right, so the city will shift that cost over to the employee will contribute. And that sets everybody up at a minimum 5%, so when you transition to VRS or not, it's always 5% minimum for the employee. Does that answer the question? I think so. Okay, so, yellow.
Thank you. It's somebody else to yellow too, but
Thank you.
I'm sitting in front. So the question is now, you said we have 2, Mission Square and VRS on this side. On our side, we have 457, which we're getting now, RS, whatever it is.
401A.
Yeah, so the money will be frozen and we won't be able to touch it. The question is, once you become vested, will you be able to touch it, or once we make the swap, it's just something we can't do anything with?
So the question is, once you transition to VRS
Yes.
and you leave your money with the Richmond Retirement System, when will you have access to those funds?
Like, for example, when he said, my roof is leaking and I need money out of my existing account to put a roof on my house, would I be able to touch it once we, which go over or no?
No, so the money, it stays frozen until you separate city service altogether. Whenever you separate from your VRS, and that's when you'll get your money.
Can y'all wait till March to make this move?
You have a year.
You do have, so can you wait till March to make this move? You could,
Yeah.
or you don't have to, or you will have a year starting January 1st to make this analysis for yourself and make your election, okay?
January 24th.
January 2024 to December 31st, 2024.
I just wanted to add on to the previous question, using the example from the presentation of needing $5,000 to put a new roof on the house.
Yeah.
When you are active in the hybrid plan on the defined contribution side, While you are an active employee, you do not have access to any defined contribution monies. You cannot borrow. You cannot take what's called an in-service distribution. You can only access money once you have joined the hybrid plan defined contribution component. Then you are no longer an active employee in a VRS covered position.
That is also true of the defined benefit plan. So basically, all of your hybrid plan is not available to you, so you have separated from service.
Okay, hold your questions, in-person audience. I know we're gonna get to some virtuals because there's a lot in the chat. So Jeff,
I may be the least popular person in this presentation. What is the policy for transitioning if I change from working for the city of Richmond to the state or another VRS provider? Will my money follow me? How would a job change affect my fund?
Okay, so the question is, what if you change VRS employers? So if you're with the city of Richmond, your benefits with the city are going to be whatever you chose. If you chose VRS and you're under the VRS, whenever you change VRS employers, you do not have access to your money if you're going from one VRS employer to the other. You have to re-elect voluntary contributions whenever you make an employer change. Not all VRS employers have all of the same benefits. We talked about some of the differences potentially with life insurance and short-term, long-term disability. So there can be some VRS benefits that are not the same when you move from one VRS employer to the other. But basically, if you are in the hybrid plan with employer A and you leave and you take a job with VRS employer B, you're going to just be reported by a different VRS employer. All of your money stays in the plan and you will just move from one employer to the other.
and I will add to that you do need to elect to transition to VRS before you would automatically, be able to move VRS employer to employer. So if you end up leaving the city before you've affirmatively transitioned to VRS yourself, you're still in RRS and then moving to VRS for the first time, just to clarify that, right? All right, next question.
We have a lot of questions that have largely been already answered. Charlie, your question about the salary increase has already been talked about. But there are a number of questions about opportunities to talk to a representative one-on-one to see if it's a valid plan for them, find out more about the plan if they're in different phases of life. Is there an opportunity to speak to someone one-on-one with VRS for the hybrid plan?
If you want to speak with someone about the hybrid plan, we cannot give you any type of guidance. All we can do is explain to you what the benefits are under the hybrid retirement plan. The tools that are available, the information's on the website. General information we can tell you about the plan. If you want to call the customer service number, you can do that. There are a limited number of virtual appointments that you can possibly set up at this time, but a lot of the information really is just the general information that we've presented in this presentation and what's on the website.
And you also have a calculator that's
Yeah, the
available.
generic calculator, if you're looking at your specific information about when you can retire, that generic calculator will do those calculations for you.
Jeff, you have one more?
I think I have one more. When should we expect the paperwork to be available for us to change our plan?
Great question. So we are working with VRS on that and getting legal counsel to review, and it will be as soon as we possibly can, in the next couple weeks, we will say. Okay, we will take some from the in-person audience. Yes, ma'am.
Whose bright idea was it to pick up a retirement plan where we could not transfer our money that we have already accumulated to the new one, and then we have to pick up more service here to do that when we're close to retirement.
Understood. So the question is, why can't we transition our service and RRS over to VRS, right?
Correct.
So RRS and VRS are very different plans. They don't speak the same language. The contribution rates in the RRS plans are totally dependent on if you're a sworn employee, if you're a general employee, you contribute 1%, you contribute 1.5, you're in the enhanced plan, you may contribute 4.57 or 5.45. So because of the variance of all the different plans in RRS, it does not equate to be able to transfer over to VRS. So that is the reasoning. Now, to answer your question about retirement years, in this transition, if you have 20 years with RRS and you choose to move over to VRS and you work another 15, you are going to get a retirement benefit for every year you worked for the city. You're not getting retirement for those years, as long as you're a full-time retirement eligible employee that entire time. So it's just a matter of looking at the different options, the different routes you could take, comparing them for yourself and making the best decision for you. You can choose to do nothing and stay in RRS and everything remains the same for you. It's not, well, so
There's gonna be a plan.
the contribution rate will change for everybody, but your available options, so the plans, for example, if you went from a general employee to a sworn employee, all of those sworn versus general employee plans will stay as it is with RRS.
And is that exact, that 5%?
Yes,
Yeah.
the 5% is pre-tax. That was the question. So that's, the contribution that you do as a defined benefit employee, the 1%, as a general employee is pre-tax. That's also pre-tax at 5%. Okay. Yes.
Do either the VRS or RRS make adjustments for inflation?
Do VRS or RRS make adjustments for inflation?
Okay, so on the VRS side, if, you join VRS, you get your 5 years of service, you become retirement eligible and you retire. There are cost of living increases on that defined benefit part of the plan. There's a formula for that and it's based on the increase in the CPI. And you have to be retired a certain length of time before you're eligible for those cost of living increases. They're always after you've reached your unreduced retirement date. So in other words, if you retire at age 60, you're not eligible for those. And you're unreduced at age 67, you would not get cost of living increases until the year after age 67. But those cost of living provisions are in the VRS plan for that defined benefit part of the plan.
And so with RRS, there are only ad hoc COLAs. And with that, that means that if council approves that there's a COLA, then all the retirees will receive it. But it's not an every year thing like VRS has.
And just to go back to the VRS, there is a formula. You don't get the full amount of what the cost of living increase is, the CPI. There's a formula and there's a cap on it. And I'm sorry, I can't quote that off my head, but that's out on the website. So there is the availability for the cost of living increases, but there is a formula and a cap on how that cost of living increase is calculated each year. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So it's actually, you can go online and look that up on VRS's website. In the front here.
Okay, my question is, I have 457 and 41. Said about the roof. If you already have a loan out on your 457 and you switch over to the VRS, what happens to that loan money? Does it freeze? Do you already take it from my money? Or do I still pay it back?
Okay, so the question was, she has a 457 with the city of Richmond, had the example of replacing a roof. What happens if you transition to VRS?
I've already borrowed from that money.
Yep, exactly. So Deborah, you want to talk about the 457?
Yeah, so with the time, my name is Deborah, the 25. So with the 457, with your outstanding loan, you will continue to pay that
via payroll, repayment, until it's paid off. And you do know that you can only take one loan out per year.
Correct, but if I switch over, I can't take anything.
Was the, okay.
If you stay with the 457,
Right.
you still be, all right, so with the transition, the Richmond 457 doesn't go anywhere. So you can continue to contribute to that and you can contribute to, take a loan one per year. They allow that. So you can, I mean, you can still do that, but you'll be able to pay that back in, like Deborah said, in payroll deduction.
Okay.
And keep in mind, I do want to say this, the 457 is, what, the way it is today is optional to do. Now, there's another 457 with the hybrid plan. So we're talking two 457s. You stay with the one for Richmond, and then if you decide to transition to VRS with a hybrid, there's another 457.
So I actually pay it too.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's mine. But the one with BRS, you can't borrow.
Exactly.
Right, but the one from Richmond, you can.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what we need to do.
Good question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
so we're going to, I'm gonna check with Jeff to see if we have virtual questions. I see your hands. All right, Jeff, any new questions?
No new questions. Any of the ones that were similar to the ones already asked, we've invited people in the chat to send those to the VRS transition questions email address.
Okay, so we'll take just 3 more here, and then we ask you to email the rest of your questions if you have any to our email group. Sir, right here.
Yeah, what is the difference in, plan 1 and plan 2 and the hybrid?
What is the difference between Plan 1 and Plan 2 and the hybrid? Great question.
Okay, Plan 1 and Plan 2 under the VRS are earlier plans. And if you are eligible for Plan 1 or Plan 2, there will be another presentation that you can go to. If you do not have previous service in Plan 1 or Plan 2, you cannot join Plan 1. So in other words, when we talk about the fact that you have no VRS service in your record prior to 2014, and you're coming in new to the VRS, you will be in the hybrid plans. You do not have an option to be in those other 2 plans. If you're curious about what they are, there is a publication on the website that will show you the differences. If you're just curious about them, but they are simply VRS defined benefit plans that have different provisions, different formulas. And it's not an option if you are going to be in the hybrid.
All right, I was employed from 97 to 2007. So if I decide to transition to VRS, would I go back in Plan 1? Because that's what they said I was in.
Okay, so if you have previous VRS service in your record, meaning you did not take your money, you did not take a refund, and you have previous VRS service in your record, it is possible you would be in Plan 1 or Plan 2. And that is something you would have to, an individual question, you would have to call VRS to confirm what your record looks like.
Mhm. And then we would also recommend that if you do call VRS and you find out that you had Plan 1 or Plan 2 service, that you attend a Plan 1 or Plan 2 session. So those will be on the calendar. So go ahead and do that. Next question.
And I understand you on that 10%
Mhm.
but here in the city of Richmond, as we all should know, we have pay break. What if you're on the top of your pay break and let's say you only got $500 staying max out at you, staying in that? How y'all will do it then?
It's still going to have, the pay will still be adjusted to whatever that is.
So they'll be outside of the pay range then?
That, yes, that's my understanding.
Yeah, it'll adjust with that.
Yeah. Nice.
If you're at the top.
Right, yeah. Right, but it will be adjusted for you regardless of the pay range. Okay, so, all right, one more question.
Is there a comparison between the 2 and
And
Yeah.
that's kind of what I was gonna ask too.
Okay.
What are the major differences between the defined benefit plans in RRS?
Mhm.
Right.
And the VRS. Okay, so the question is, are there comparisons between RRS plans and VRS plans and the attributes? So the answer to that is yes, we do have a resource on the website. It's a quick looks documents. When you go to the My Options page, you might go to the drop down that applies to you. And at the bottom of the VRS section, it will show you a side-by-side comparison of the plans. If you have a hybrid plan versus the RRS DC plan, we have the plan 1 and 2 compared with the RRS DB plans. And so you can see the side-by-side comparison.
Yeah, it's for it on the city website, it's not there.
We have a new website. So the website is new for VRS for our retirement transition. And go to that link. You can click on the My Options page and it's within the drop down, the accordions. So we can help you locate that. I'll get your email after and we can make sure that you find those.
I don't think it's just me, so I think just as a.
Sure, we'll send it out and make sure it's available. Yep. Will do. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and close out because we are at time, but please, if you have additional questions, VRS transition questions at rva.gov is the email. And it's the email address that you will get updates and information about the schedule. So you can email that box if you have questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm sorry. I don't know what I ended up doing. Like, maybe it's, we don't have.